So, this was actually a pretty easy list to make this year. If you watched my last video detailing the best movies of 2015, why wouldn't you? Are you trying to hurt my feelings? You'll know that I think that the year just gone was a pretty darn good year. One of those reasons is that there weren't many movies that were downright bad. Don't get me wrong, there were still lots of movies that weren't very good, some terrible ones in fact, we'll get to those in a minute, but a lot of the films were either just boring, forgettable, or mediocre. It's strange how a lot of terrible movies just flew under people's radars this year. Just for context's sake, Pixels, Jupiter Ascending, and Mordecai aren't on this list, and they are all Razzie nominees. That's how bad some of the following movies are. But I know that you're here to see me rage or lash out against the worst movies of the past year. Don't look at me like that. I know your game. I see the viewing figures. So let's just dive right in, shall we? The same rules apply here as they did with the last top 10. 2014 US holdover movies do apply, and we are going by UK release dates. Also, no easy targets. We're going for theatrically released movies. No home media, no straight to video, theatrically released movies. So without further ado, I present to you the top 10 worst movies of 2015.
Number 10. The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 in 3D.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. In terms of the movie's objective quality, The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 normally wouldn't make it on this list. In fact, it probably wouldn't make any sort of list except for, you know, a most mediocre movies list. No. The reason that this movie is on the list is for one very specific reason. It's an absolute eyesore in 3D. I normally don't have an issue with 3D movies and I don't mind watching them, but with Mockingjay Part 2, Lionsgate had the audacity to release a 3D print of their big tentpole blockbuster of 2015 in such a shoddy, messy, blurry state. This, folks, this is the experience of watching Mockingjay Part 2 in 3D. Look at this shit. This is about as close as you can get to a movie being a defective fucking product. And before you ask, folks, I'm normally fine with 3D movies, and the trailers that played before Mockingjay Part 2 in 3D, those were great looking trailers. They looked fine, there was nothing wrong with the screen, and just to make sure that it wasn't a fluke that I was watching a bad print, I saw the movie twice, in 2 different cinemas. Both of them were a blurry mess. Yes, the final installment in the Hunger Games series is a boring, inactive slog with a conclusion that proves there's absolutely no overriding point to the entire enterprise, and because the last movie was split into 2 parts unnecessarily and The Hunger Games Catching Fire was a movie where absolutely nothing happened, we have a 4-film franchise that could have been told in 2 movies. What a waste of time. But that 3D print... Honestly, Lionsgate, where the hell is your dignity? Releasing a movie in that state and charging a premium ticket price for the privilege. That is why this otherwise stale and inert blockbuster is on this list. Shame on you, Lionsgate.
Number 9. Seventh Son.
On paper, Seventh Son is the type of movie that should tick all of the boxes for me. We've got Academy Award winning actors, nominated directors, a solid premise, a huge variety of monsters, blade-wielding dragons, assassins that turn into panthers, Jeff Bridges hamming it up as a drunken witch hunter and more, so what the hell happened here? Seventh Son is a movie so lacking in enthusiasm and has no interest in exploring potentially compelling themes about betrayal, about coping with loss and more, but instead we have stupid storytelling like how the 2 young leads know that they're supposed to fall in love with each other because there's a spark between them. No, really, a literal spark. I would say this movie would have worked in the hands of a better creative team, but just look at the pedigree of the people who did make Seventh Son. The people behind the movie have enough Oscars between them to put Peter Jackson to shame, so what the hell happened? I've not got a clue. All the stars were aligned, all the pieces were in place, but the end result is just a stupid though high concept fantasy flop.
Number 8. Taken 3. No, sorry, Tak 3.
Tak-3 is not only the worst installment in what was already a franchise going downhill fast, but it's easily the weakest action film to star the once revered Liam Neeson since the original Taken gave his career a new lease on life. A plot where Brian Mills has to avoid the authorities isn't a bad setup, but when the movie gives Brian absolutely no reason to not cooperate with the police, we have a narrative that's built on absolutely no foundations, not to mention the fact that the once compassionate and endearing lead is now a complete maniac, with him throwing a live grenade in a cupboard at a public school without looking to see if anyone was in the cupboard. And one of the funniest moments of 2015 has Brian say that his top priority is his daughter, mere seconds before he tries to destroy the plane that his daughter is currently on. Yes, that happens. And director Olivier Megaton, who has done nothing to earn that surname, has a visual style that isn't so much frenetic as it is throwing the film stock into a blender and sellotaping it back and releasing it as a rip-off of The Fugitive. The action in Tak-3 isn't just weak, it's absolutely pitiful. There have been rumblings and rumours of a Taken 4, but after this movie, the only humane course of action is that this franchise should be taken out back and shot.
Number 7. American Sniper.
In terms of modern military movies, American Sniper shares the distinction of being at the bottom of the barrel, along with the Red Dawn remake or Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor. Clint Eastwood's American Sniper isn't so much a movie as it is a piece of pro-war propaganda that spouts xenophobia, paints the war on terror in irresponsibly black and white terms, and doesn't even have the goddamn courtesy to actually end a movie in a respectful and mature fashion, instead awkwardly tacking on the fate of Chris Kyle through on-screen text dumps because his ultimate fate goes against everything the movie was trying to promote. Incidentally, I know that there's been a lot of controversy recently about the Academy Awards supposedly being racist, you know, Oscars so white and all that stuff, and while I don't think that's strictly speaking true, when they nominate an openly racist movie like American Sniper, the same year that the Martin Luther King biopic Selma is considered one of the biggest snubs, they're not doing much to disprove those allegations. And terrible production values are the icing on the shit-covered sundae, with out-of-sync bullet sound effects, CGI that resembles The Sims from the year 2000, as well as one of the most embarrassingly fake babies that has ever graced movie screens. American Sniper is a spineless movie that doesn't even bother to say anything about Chris Kyle's life, war, post-traumatic stress disorder, or even the circumstances surrounding his death. Utterly cowardly and morally low.
Number 6. Unfinished Business.
Just when you thought Vince Vaughn's career couldn't sink any lower, he goes ahead and stars in Unfinished Business, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who completely forgot that this movie existed, which is probably why it didn't rate much higher. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with being lowbrow or stupid or trashy or vulgar if you're going for shock value, but Unfinished Business keeps pretending it has a higher purpose and is trying to be an emotional story about a father who works too much and needs to spend more time with his family. Fuck that noise. You do not get to have a scene where Nick Frost sticks his massive cock in a glory hole and pretend you're being profound, whilst also shilling a metric ton of shameless product placement. The movie limps along from set piece to set piece with zero thought or effort, with Dave Franco being the only redeemable element of the production. Unfinished Business is the nadir of comedy in 2015, and that is saying a lot, the same year that Pixels and Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 came out. Come and take your first place trophy, Vince Vaughn. Your parents must be proud.
Number 5. Paper Towns.
Now, this is where we start getting to the more abhorrent films. I initially braced myself for a movie that was as stunningly mediocre as the last John Green adaptation, The Fault in Our Stars, meaning I wasn't quite prepared for a movie as bafflingly misogynistic and self-important as Paper Towns. It would take a good hour for me to list off the level of storytelling incompetence on display here. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, but I'll try and summarise. Paper Towns claims to be a deconstruction of the manic pixie dream girl story trope, but instead ends up reinforcing that trope and pandering to the self-entitled male teenage mindset that makes them think that doing something nice automatically grants you female romantic affection. And make no mistake, despite the author's protests, Margot in the movie is the most manic pixie dream girl to ever manic pixie dream girl. She's such an unbearable hipster, and don't even get me started on the other female presence, Lacey, played by Halston Sage, a character whose first key scene has her resenting the fact that she's treated like a prop and just an object object of boys' affection, and then the movie literally proceeds to treat her like a prop, and her sole role is to be the object of affection for the male comic relief. Oh my god, this fucking movie! And even setting aside the gross misogyny and the movie's commitment to massaging the ego of teenage fuckboys, Paper Towns fails in basic characterization, plotting, structure, and is so inept in its storytelling that its primary plot point is that the main characters need to be back in time for prom, but the movie doesn't even have the cocking decency to tell the audience when prom actually fucking is. When a writer can't even handle as basic a concept as a ticking clock, you know you are in bad company. Fuck Paper Towns.
Number 4. Fantastic Four. No, sorry, Fantastic.
The fourth worst movie of the year is the fourth movie based on the Fantastic Four, and is by far the shittiest attempt at adapting the Fab Four onto movie screens. While not quite as insulting to your intelligence as the biblical failure that was The Amazing Spider-Man 2 last year, because of the fact that this movie actually had promising foundations and didn't have previous proven templates to work from, Fantastic is the type of movie I really wish had been good. Don't get me wrong, I want every movie I go to see to be good. Of course, it's my job. Why would I want to go into a movie? Why would I want to go into work and actively hate my experience? That's not a healthy mindset to be in. I wish this movie had been good because I would like to see a relatively low-key, slow-burn, action-light superhero movie work and see financial success. See, Fantastic is not bad because there's very little action in it. It's bad because it absolutely sucks the Human Torch's deadly flammable scrotum. We have a promising cast absolutely wasted. You've got the best villain in comic books reduced to a crash test dummy who's been put in a microwave. You've got a 90-minute movie with absolutely no pulse or underlying soul or humanity to speak of, and it has no idea what it wants to be or who it's catering itself to. Fantastic is the type of movie where no one is happy about it.
Number 3. The Gallows.
It's a western, mainstream found-footage horror film, so you know it's going to be a piece of absolute fuck puppetry, but The Gallows takes found-footage horror to a depressingly low level. A found-footage gimmick that is undercut by the very story it's portraying, i.e., why would these teenagers who are trying to commit a crime in secret record themselves committing the clitting crime? We've insufferable main characters, twists that don't make a lick of sense, pure unbridled incompetence behind the camera, and a main villain so boring and lacking in personality that it's almost admirable. We have a scene where someone falls off a ladder from a great height and lands on their back, but somehow breaks their ankle. We have a villain whose motivation contradicts everything the audience are told. We have the movie give away a key twist in the opening seconds, only for the movie to act surprised an hour later at something everyone already knew. We have the premise of an empty, haunted theatre, utterly and unforgivably wasted, and there's not a single scare in this movie that isn't a jump scare or a complete fake out. If stupidity and incompetence was a fuel source, The Gallows would solve the energy crisis.
Number 2. Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, in 3D.
In terms of the quality of its storytelling, the writing, the acting, the directing, etc., The Gallows is probably a worse movie than Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, but the reason this one ranks higher is twofold. One, this is the 6th movie in this franchise. They should fucking know better by now. And 2, we have another movie that was crippled by the 3D movie-going experience. After 6 movies in this franchise that has never once had a good installment, I think it's safe to say that the Paranormal Activity franchise is, objectively, the worst theatrical horror movie franchise of all time. But if this was meant to be the final installment, Blumhouse Productions wanted to go out with a bang and decided to shit out the worst Paranormal Activity movie yet. The franchise's hallmark elements are here on full display. Main characters with no personality, a runtime that is only as long as it is because the ghosts take their sweet ass time, characters not believing there's a ghost even though there is video proof of it happening, 90% of the scares are fake outs, nothing of interest happens until the last 5 minutes, and we have dozens of unresolved plot threads even though this is meant to be a final installment. But what really tipped this movie over the edge was the abhorrent use of 3D when the viewpoint switches to a 1080p widescreen 3D camera that was meant to be built in the 1980s, and I'm not even making that up. See, 2D shaky cam found footage is terrible enough, but when you add 3D to the mix, you're gonna have a bad time. Now, I have high tolerance for 3D movies and never get headaches or motion sickness from the format. I can watch Cloverfield on the big screen and feel absolutely fine, so found footage is okay with me. But 10 minutes into Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension, I could feel the motion sickness. At least 10 people had to leave my screening because they were getting so sick from the vomit-inducing shaky cam 3D. It's such a stunning error of judgment from everyone involved in this movie creatively that I literally can't fathom a world where anyone thought this was a good idea. The Gallows may be worse in terms of objective quality, but the Gallows didn't literally hurt you. And if you watch the movie in 2D, then you miss out on a lot of gimmicky effects that would look stupid if not viewed through those obstructive glasses. You can't win here. You either watch the movie in 3D and suffer, or watch it in 2D and get a stupid looking movie. Found footage, as I have said time and time again, is a fucking cancer to the horror genre and needs to be killed off immediately before it spreads and kills the host. Now, before we get to the worst movies of 2015, let's just breeze through a couple of honourable mentions first.
Child 44, The Gambler, Wildcard, Absolutely Anything, Pixels, Pan, Mordecai, and Me and Earl and the Dying Girl.
Now, people wonder why I get so passionate about movies and why I get so angry at ones that I consider so morally repugnant, and well, the reason for that is media is important. When you're a filmmaker, you are someone with influence, you are someone with power, and it is your moral obligation, your responsibility, if you will, to use that power for the benefit of others, to make the world a better place, whether it is enlightening through a book or educating through film or just entertaining. When you're a filmmaker, you can inform, you can educate, you can entertain, you can enlighten, but failing all of that, you can at least be responsible. And it's for that reason why the worst movie of 2015 is so irresponsible that I'm tempted to say that it's actually pretty dangerous.
Number 1. 50 Shades of Grey. Are you even surprised?
50 Shades of Grey is one of the most genuinely depressing movie-going experiences that I've ever had the misfortune to suffer through. I expected to go into the theatre on Valentine's weekend and make fun of it, but by the time the credits rolled, I was just so crestfallen, so despondent. I know that other online critics like Jeremy Jahns or Chris Stuckman have also put this movie as the worst of 2015, but in their list videos, they barely even scratch the surface as to what is wrong with this absolute abomination. What I had witnessed, to my horror, was a romance movie about how romantic and beautiful domestic abuse is. I expected stupid and cheesy schlock for me to laugh at, but that veneer quickly faded away to reveal a morbid and twisted core. 50 Shades of Grey takes domestic abuse and sells it to the masses, masquerading as romance. It portrays a dangerous, inaccurate interpretation of BDSM, which is all about pain for the person inflicting it with no regards to the feelings of the partner receiving it. A movie that plays Beyoncé's cover of Crazy Love over images of the female lead being physically and sexually abused, and the filmmakers want the audience to feel turned on by it. But in reality, 50 Shades of Grey has the sex appeal of a barbed wire condom. It's about as sexy as being waterboarded while having your feet ground into a pulp by a blender. We have a lead character who is portrayed as being sexy and romantic and a tortured lost soul, but in reality he's a fucking bully who demands control over a person's life for his own sadistic amusement, and he's abusing someone who he actively wants to hurt, not please her, hurt her. To my horror, I was watching pure, unbridled domestic abuse take place in a movie that was trying to titillate its audience at Valentine's weekend. But putting all of that to one side for a moment, we have flat direction, badly written characters, actors with no chemistry whatsoever, and while the two leads have given good performances elsewhere, in this movie I have seen mimes with better line delivery than these two actors. As for the broad strokes of the romance without the sexual connotations, you have a movie that fails to grasp romantic relationships on a fundamental level. In terms of sexual content, I have seen 12A movies that are more risque than this. The sexual content is tepid at best, so this movie's sole reason for existing doesn't even begin to deliver. But the main issue comes from adapting a source material like this, and I'm not just talking about the quality of the book, that's got nothing to do with it. I know that people will argue saying, but the book was terrible, what were you expecting? I have seen movies that were based off of terrible books. That is not the issue here, and that is an irrelevant topic. What I'm talking about is how 50 Shades of Grey, it revolves around being a personal experience when you're reading it from a book. When you read a book, it is a one-on-one personal experience, and Anastasia Steele in the book is so blandly written that she's meant to act as a sort of surrogate for the presumably female reader to impart their fantasies onto the character. They impart their personal fantasies, their personal preferences onto that book, and that is what makes it sexual for them. That is what makes their fantasies come alive, and that is why that book was so successful. But when you adapt that to film, you have to turn that blank surrogate into an actual character. You have to take that surrogate and make them someone on a screen. You have to make them a character, and when you do that, when you remove the fantasy element from the equation, you get a movie that's about abuse and how romantic it's meant to be. I wouldn't wish this cinematic STD on my worst enemies, and I know people are going to say, but it's not for you, it's for women. So, are you saying that women don't deserve good movies? Fuck that nonsense. But the main issue here is if just one person left that screening of 50 Shades of Grey and thought that's what BDSM actually was and tried to use it on their partner, whether it's male to female, female to male, doesn't matter. If just one person did that, and frankly one is too many, then 50 Shades of Grey has objectively, actively, and irrevocably made the world a worse place by its very existence. And to the filmmakers out there, those of you responsible for making 50 Shades of Grey, You know what, I don't even think I actually have the words to accurately describe you, but how dare you use your position of power and position of influence in the entertainment industry to create something actively damaging. You betrayed the trust of the movie-going public and profited off it. You took a sensitive subject and twisted and distorted it until it resembled domestic abuse, which you sold to the mainstream audiences as entertainment. There are no shades of grey here, this is startlingly clear. This is irresponsible and dangerous filmmaking, and it is without question the worst movie of 2015.